There's been a continuous change of curriculum over the course of my teaching career, but I've always believed in fostering positive relationships with my students. One way I do this is through establishing structures within the school day that allow opportunities for my students to explore their own interests as well as have choice in learning activities. As Henderson shared, validating students' voices, their learning processes, and products and going where they want to go is something we believe strongly because we see it work. The Reading and Writing Workshop supports the student-directed approach to learning with the teacher as the mentor or guide. Using this approach to learning, I'm able to meet the needs of my students through differentiation, through conferencing, and small group instruction. I also allow lots of time for sharing and partner work throughout the school day. This gives my students a chance to take ownership of their learning and be proud of their accomplishments. Learning about 3S pedagogy has validated many of my current teaching practices and caused me to reflect on how I can improve as a lead learner in conveying my ideas on student engagement to other professionals. It caused me to ask a lot of questions, such as how can I continue to be a responsive teacher and find this wiggle room within my current educational system? Or in what capacity can I influence educational practices to reform rather than transform our current system of education to a more holistic approach of teaching and learning? I'm hopeful that through my involvement with the Kentucky Reading Project and collaborating closely with colleagues, that I will be able to inspire educators to reflect on their own practices and try new approaches in their classroom. Keeping conversations open and being willing to see ideas through someone else's lens is important to this collaborative and reflective practice. In terms of Valley's technical reflection model, I have engaged in the process of researching literacy engagement over the past few years so as to improve my own instructional practices and promote family literacy. In my leadership plan, I shared how I refined my practices in order to meet the needs of my students. By reflecting on the use of language within the context of my classroom, my ELL students' primary forms of language, as well as more standardized forms of English, I can critically assess instructional materials and strive to practice inclusion in my classroom. Lazar, Edwards, and Macmillan shared in their book, Bridging Literacy and Equity. As educators, we need to recognize the value of students' language and help them acquire more standardized forms of English so they can select the language forms that are powerful and purposeful across a range of social contexts. Honoring my students' languages and encouraging students to express themselves is another way I practice inclusion. The overall goal of my leadership plan is to work collaboratively with teachers to establish effective methods of meeting students' literacy needs both in the school and home setting. Working closely with all stakeholders, administration, teachers, and parents, I plan to initiate conversations and invitations toward meeting this goal. This includes looking at research and literacy resource materials as discussed in my plan during teen and staff meetings. Evaluating our current educational practices and invitations for family involvement is essential to enacting change in a positive way towards student learning of the subject, as well as developing their social-emotional skills, encapsulating the 3S pedagogy. Being conscientious about students' backgrounds and experiences through working closely with their families is one way I will address equity within my plan. Also, working closely with my school's ESL teachers to initiate meetings with families and provide support for student learning in the home is another way I will address student equity. The ultimate desired outcome would be students who are motivated to read, write, and share their learning with others by working collaboratively with diverse partners.